Hey guys, it's Rekt Capital and welcome to today's video update. We're going to be focusing on how does this third Bitcoin halving compare to the other Bitcoin halvings in the past. We're going to be specifically focusing on the post-halving period. So of course we have a few weeks of the post-halving period in the books when it comes to halving 3. It's already been around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the 7th week that Bitcoin is consolidating within this narrow $1,000 range at highs. The $1,000 range is $8,700 to $9,700. So a $1,000 range where Bitcoin has essentially just been meandering from range low to range high, back to range low, back to range high, over and over again. Just very easy price action right over here. Quite predictable price action here, just sideways, sinusoidal behavior in Bitcoin's price action. And what we need to focus on at the moment is what is going on in these weeks post-halving. So it has been 6 full weeks already. This is already the 7th week, and we're just seeing consolidation. And people are a bit disenchanted by that. They're a bit discouraged because they thought that because of the halving, Bitcoin was going to rally exponentially. And though that is the case, historically speaking, when we look back on halving 1 and halving 2, Bitcoin halving 3 seems to have underdelivered. It doesn't seem to have followed through on its historical tendencies, but that's not quite the case, which is why I'm making this video today. We need to focus on post-halving periods, at least the immediate post-halving periods, because we know what happens in the post-halving periods over the next coming months. After each halving, that's when Bitcoin tends to rally exponentially and then eventually reaches all-time highs, new all-time highs. But we don't really focus on the immediate aftermath after the halving. We don't focus on the immediate few weeks following from the halving, and I think there's a lot of value in looking at those periods. So for the first 7 weeks after halving 3, we just see consolidation. Is that the same with halving 1, or specifically post-halving 1? So if we just look at the first week after halving 1, there was a bit of a breakout. But afterwards, we just saw small pullback, essentially speaking, a consolidation period for a few weeks. So after that first week of breaking out right over here, we've seen a few straight weeks of consolidation. This is the period where we break out from that consolidation period. So let's just zoom in here. We're seeing a sideways price action. We're seeing sideways price behavior for many weeks after that initial breakout, a breakout from the range, because essentially speaking, this was a range. So it is quite analogous to what's going on at the moment, right? If we look at halving 1, post-halving 1, and post-halving 3, there is also a range which is spanning for a few weeks. So post-halving 1, it took 4 weeks of consolidation before we actually saw many weeks of upside, which is quite interesting to see because we're already seeing a consolidation period post-halving 1 after that initial breakout, a post-halving 3 consolidation period as well. And given the fact that 2012 is when the Bitcoin halving 1 occurred, we have to understand also that the market is maturing, it's getting bigger and bigger, growing in market cap. So this 4-week period post-halving 1, we can't really equate that to what's going on at the moment for post-halving 3 because it might take a little bit longer for the cycles to play out post-halving 3 in comparison to a much earlier, less mature market that we saw post-halving 1. But in any case, this is the most important thing to take away, a consolidation period after halving 1. So what was the price action like post-halving 2? If we zoom in here, week 1 was when we saw a retrace begin, and then week 2, week 3 is where we saw that retrace really conclude in a form of a downward wick, so a very volatile wicking price action into those lower buy orders just to exhaust the sell side momentum and bring about a consolidation period yet again for 3 straight weeks. Once that sell-side momentum tapered off on that retrace, we saw an accumulation period for 3 weeks, followed by a breakout. So essentially speaking, this was a narrow range. So if we bring about this sideways range and extend it towards the right, we can notice that once we broke out from this range, we pulled back to just test the top of this range for many weeks as well. So you can see here the top of this old range, the range high, is figuring actually as a new support. And the thing about this is that not only are we retesting the top of that old range, but we're forming a new range, which also happens to last for many weeks at a time. So this first preliminary range lasted 3 weeks, a breakout from that range to form yet another range, which was just retesting the top of that previous range. So lots of things going on a technical sense there, but this range lasted for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks before we got that range breakout afterwards, and then we saw many weeks of upside, chances for some dipping price action for buyers to get in and chase the uptrend, but we had a healthy bull trend afterwards. Even though we saw some strong retraces, these are healthy retraces in an otherwise stable, normal growth cycle for Bitcoin. So in any case, what I'm trying to drive home here is that consolidation over here, and even post-halving 1, you can see that these weeks of consolidation do differ. The length of these consolidation periods do differ. This is a 4-week consolidation period before many weeks of upside. This is a consolidation period that lasted for 3 weeks before a small breakout to just begin another consolidation period, which lasted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. So in total, 8 weeks of consolidation post-halving 2, and in total of 4 weeks consolidation post-halving 1. So that's quite interesting to note, because even if we try to extrapolate it in terms of a factor of 2, so it's 4 weeks post-halving 1, it's 8 weeks post-halving 2, then surely we should have 12 weeks post-halving 3, which would be quite interesting to see. But the main thing that I want to drive here is that consolidation within this range is not out of the ordinary. Bitcoin is no stranger to consolidation, to sideways price action in a post-halving period. And the thing to bear in mind is, just to remove ourselves what is going on in terms of directional bias, we need to just understand that this period over here is Bitcoin preparing for a new move. And of course, theoretically speaking, this move could occur towards the upside, but it could also occur towards the downside. And the thing to bear in mind here is that we have very specific trigger points for a bullish case: a weekly close above 9,650, 9,700, a weekly close above that level, followed by a successful pullback into a support of testing that level as a new support. That would be a very good sign for beginning a breakout bull trend from this essentially reaccumulation period. But if we manage to reach this level, which is another specific trigger point, but for the bearish bias, if we reach the weekly range low of 8,700 and actually weekly close below it and even test it as a new resistance to just reject it towards the downside, that's where we notice that we're actually going to see a correction from this point, and this period of consolidation was actually a period of distribution. So the key here is this reaccumulation, or is this actually distribution before actually seeing a further correction? Historically speaking, the Bitcoin halving is a major catalyst to just propel Bitcoin into a new bull market. So history is suggesting that we will see a further breakout from this reaccumulation range and see new all-time highs in the next few years. But at the same time, we have to remain objective and understand that there are 2 trigger points over here, and it's very easy to just tailor our strategy based on what happens. A breakout past the range high, and we'll probably see a bull trend. A breakdown from the range low over here, and we'll probably see some further downside, and a great opportunity just to accumulate Bitcoin at lower levels. So essentially what we're looking for a bullish case is we're looking for something similar to what happened to post-halving 2, similar to what happened to Bitcoin in its post-halving 2 price action. Consolidation within a range, followed by a breakout, and then followed by many weeks of sideways accumulation. But the whole idea that I'm trying to present to you guys is that this top of this range was retested as a support before moving higher, and that's essentially what I want to drive home as well, because Bitcoin needs to break past this range high and test it as a support, much like it did post-halving too. So testing that old range as a new support just to springboard prices to higher levels. So those are two key aspects to Bitcoin's price action post-halving. A consolidation period is not out of the ordinary. It's definitely something that we see recurring in Bitcoin's price action in its post-halving period. Consolidation is one of the more predominant trends, and even with Bitcoin halving number 1, we have this consolidation within this range, a breakout from this point. But if we were actually to zoom in on the daily, we could even see a retest attempt of the top of this range as a new support. So sometimes we see this on the weekly time frame, which is even a stronger signal, but it can also happen on the daily, and that sometimes is enough. And post halving number 1, this indeed could have happened as well, but on the weekly time frame we have an even better example in post halving number 2, because it's very clear on the weekly time frame that this old range high was retested as a new support before moving to higher levels. So those are the two key aspects that we need to bear in mind when considering Bitcoin's price action after the halving. And here is a summary of what we've just been talking about. And the last thing that I'd like to talk about before we conclude this episode are the Bitcoin quarterly returns, and I want to focus specifically on the post-halving periods. And of course, this data doesn't extend further than 2014, so we might miss out on Bitcoin halving number 1. But having said that, I'm going to be focusing on quarter 3 in a post-halving period. And as you guys might know, after halving 1 in 2013, we only saw many weeks of upside afterwards, and then we saw a bear market following that top of $270. So we saw a bull market, an uninterrupted bull market, essentially speaking. So those were very good quarterly gains, pretty much green all the time. So in this case, Bitcoin halving number 1 won't necessarily aid this analysis, which I'm going to share with you guys. But let's focus on Bitcoin halving number 2 and number 3. We are currently in quarter 3. We're approaching quarter 3. And if we focus on the 2016 period, we'll notice that in quarter 3 of 2016, in a post-halving period, in the immediate post-halving period, we saw minus 9% quarterly returns in Bitcoin in quarter 3 of 2016, minus 9%. And what I want to drive home here is that we're about to approach quarter 3 2020, and we have to emphasize that a negative quarter 3 isn't necessarily out of the question, because of course Bitcoin could even rally towards the top of this range and reject once again, and then see many weeks of controlled downside like we saw right over here. And that would still count as a negative return, a negative quarterly return for Bitcoin, if we see many weeks of downside following that next range high rejection into quarter 3. But we'd still be in this range. So it's very important to understand the price context for a potential negative third quarter for Bitcoin this year. So even though a red quarter 3 for Bitcoin quarterly returns this year is a possibility, we have to bear in mind the overall price context, because if we're going to see a negative quarter while Bitcoin is still in this macro weekly range, then there's nothing necessarily to worry about unless we see a confirmed breach of this range low. So it's very important to just hold that price context in your mind, even if we see a negative quarter. And if we just look at the historical quarter 3s in the past, these do tend to be red more often than not. And having said that, it's all about the range, and it's always been about the range in a Bitcoin post-halving period. And having said that, that's about it for today's video update. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider dropping a like if you enjoyed the video, and of course subscribe for more videos like this in the future. I'm Rekt Capital, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Speak soon.